In this video, we're going to be talking about listeners. A lot of people come to us and say, what does listener slots mean? Or how many listeners do I need for my radio station? Or X amount of listener slots isn't enough. I'm thinking of holding thousands of listeners. So how is 50 slots going to cope with the demand? First of all, let's just answer the core question. What are listener slots? All of our Shoutcast servers and our products are priced based on the amount of listener slots you get. And this simply refers to the number of listeners you can have connected to your server at one time. So imagine it like this. If you go to a movie theatre and watch a film, there are so many seats in that theatre. Say there's 100 seats, e.g. 100 listener slots. When 100 people come and sit down in those seats, all the seats or all the listener slots become full, but as soon as 10 people go up and leave, those seats will become available again. And listener slots works in exactly the same way. So if you've got 100 people connected and listening to your radio station, as soon as 10 people stop listening to your station, those 10 listener slots will become available for more listeners to come and connect and listen to your station. Okay, so the next thing I want to address is you may be thinking 50 listener slots isn't enough for me. I want to have much more than 50 listeners connecting to my radio station. What if I told you with 50 listener slots you could have hundreds of people, maybe even thousands of people listening to your radio station over the course of a day or a month? You've got to bear in mind, and a lot of radio station owners forget this, that people listen for short periods of time. People, and it's a fact, that will not listen to your radio station 24/7. People will not be sat there tuned in for any huge amount of time. In this example today, we're going to be using an example of an hour, the average listen time being an hour. Now, of course, there are people who will listen for longer than an hour, but then there are also lots and lots of listeners who will tune in for a couple of minutes, for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, for 30 minutes. But I think an hour is a pretty good average to go by. So on this basis, 50 listener slots can actually cater for thousands of different people. Here's what I mean. Going back to the movie theatre example, do you think advertisers will pay just because they want to advertise to 100 people who are watching one film? Absolutely not. They're going to pay because once those 100 people have gone, 100 other people are going to come and sit down in those 100 seats and watch the same film again or watch a different film. And it works like that, exactly the same in internet radio. You've got to remember that your listeners will not be sat there watching the film 24/7. Listeners will not be tuned into your station all the time. Listeners will come and go and you'll be getting thousands of different listeners through your doors. Having said all that, let's draw a bit of a diagram up here on the board and run some numbers by you just to show you what sort of listener levels you can expect with various different capacity servers. So in this example, let's look at, say, a fairly basic entry level package of 50 slots, and then maybe 100, and then maybe 300. In fact, let's go right down to, say, 25 slots, just so you've got a broad range here. These servers, you may be thinking, having 50 people tuning into my radio station is not really a great big audience. But when you start breaking this down, you can actually realize with a 50 slot server, you can hold huge amounts of people. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to break these down into how many people you could expect to tune in throughout the course of a day, how many different listeners you could expect throughout the course of a day, on the premise that each listener will be tuned in on average for an hour. Now, as I said earlier, people will be listening for a lot less than this, and some people will listen for more than this, but it's a kind of a good go-between. So per day, and this is a really easy calculation you can do yourself as well. If we times 25 listeners by 24 hours, we get 600. Okay, so throughout the course of the day, you could expect 600 people on the basis that they're listening for about an hour each to tune into your radio station with just 25 listener slots. 50 listener slots becomes a little bit more interesting. 1,200 people. Likewise, 100. We're doubling the figures. This is getting a lot more exciting. And then finally, we can expect around 7,000 people to tune in if they're listening for an average of an hour. As I said, throughout the course of a day, 7,200 on a 300 slot server. So those figures may sound a little bit more interesting. What happens if you want much bigger audiences than this? Well, you've got to bear in mind, people aren't going to be listening for days at a time. As I say, people won't be listening for hours and hours and hours at a time. They're going to come and go. Likewise, you'll have different listeners on different days. not going to have the same set of listeners who are watching the movie for several days at a time. So let's look at the per month figures, and this is where it becomes really, really, really interesting. And of course, you know, these figures are the ones you probably want to be taking to your advertisers and saying, look guys, you've got the opportunity here to get in front of not 25 people, you know, not 600 people, but over the course of a month, 600 times 30, you know, you can work this out for yourself, 18,000 different people who may tune into your radio station throughout the course of a month. Doesn't matter if you can only have 25 people listening at one time, it's the number of different people who will be constantly tuning in and out of your station all month that really is what the advertisers are actually interested in. Likewise, you know, 36K here gets more and more exciting as we go. 72K, 72,000 different people listening to your radio station on just 100 slots. So let's go for the big one here. And this is something that'll really get your appetite going, I hope. 216,000 people who could potentially tune into your radio station on just 300 listener slots. So just 300 people at one time may not sound impressive, but you're getting potentially 216,000 people who are listening to your radio station each and every single month. And obviously these figures can be multiplied again by 12 to produce some really, really exciting stats. So if you're putting together packages for your advertisers, you might want to consider putting these figures in there. So if you're putting together a media pack for advertisers, you know, why not list these figures? Why not say, look, here's how many listeners we get a month. And then all you have to do is have a disclaimer at the bottom of the page which says, you know, this is based on an estimate based on the, you know, each listener listening for an average of 1 hour at a time. Most advertisers will be completely comfortable and completely happy with this. And in fact, in the radio industry, this is common because FM radio doesn't have the ability to actually measure accurately, you know, the amount of people listening. They don't have the ability to measure audience data. So it's all done based on estimates and, you know, things like that. It's never 100% accurate, so it's always done based on estimates. So there's no reason why you can't do exactly the same with your internet radio station when you're searching for sponsors or advertisers, or really anyone who's interested in maybe investing in your radio station or becoming a shareholder, or etc, etc. Hopefully this has explained a bit about listener slots, and hopefully I've given you a bit of an insight so you can go away and make a decision on exactly how many listeners you need on your radio station to succeed. Thanks very much for watching. Undoubtedly, I'll be speaking to you again in the very near future. Take care.